What makes a good life? This is the topic of so many books and so many conversations and TV shows. Well, enter Dr. Howard Tucker, who is recorded in the Guinness World Book of Records as being the oldest practicing doctor at 101 years of age. And in today's podcast, I'm going to talk to you about the tips that he gives that has allowed him and enabled him to be still actively practicing at 101. So what are his tips for the good life? And I'm your host, Dr. Caroline Leaf, and welcome to my podcast, Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. And just before we dive in, I just want to remind you about my Neurocycle app is now available in the web version. And you can go to neurocycle.app and you can see the link in the show notes, and you'll be able to get 20% off if you get the web version of the Neurocycle app. Then I have my great Brainy Bundle with my latest book, How to Help Your Child Clean Up the Mental Mess, with the little brainy character that's throughout as a toy. You can buy the toy, so this helps you to help your child deal with the challenges of life, deal with the emotions that are swirling around, deal with all the things that they're exposed to. I'll give you exactly how to do that in this book. Trauma, habits, social situations. Brainy appears throughout the book, so it's really great because children relate really well to having a toy to be able to talk about their issues and mental health, so it becomes a great tool for that. We even have a coloring book, Coloring with Brainy and Friends, which covers various scenarios like being sad or being bullied or whatever, and so children can use that to color it in, and it becomes a point of departure for being able to talk to children about these difficult issues. So you can go and find that at our webpage, drleaf.com, and the link and details will also be in the show notes. And also you can watch this podcast if you want via YouTube. Just head over to YouTube and look for Dr. Caroline Leaf, and you'll find this via YouTube. So for those of you that were listening, just listening on podcast, the little toy, I was holding up the little Brainy character toy, which is a little plush toy that is super cute, and as I said, goes along with the Brainy Bundle. Okay, let's dive in to how to live the good life from Dr. Tucker, who, 101 years old, and he's still practicing in the Guinness World Book of Records. That's phenomenal. I plan on doing that. I'm planning on being 101 and still doing this stuff. So, and in high shoes, okay? Okay, so just think about it. With there's so much research and development on longevity and on human enhancement technologies and biohacking to extend life. It's really a big deal and a big interest, and there's so much about it in books and articles, and you'll find it all over the news and everything. But I kind of think sometimes when I read all these things, which are very fascinating, and it's interesting to see what's happening, but I do question that maybe or not even maybe, I'm pretty certain that we've missed the most important biohack. And that biohack is the mind. How are we managing our minds? There's so much emphasis on things to put into our bodies and things to do to our bodies and to the physical brain and body. But there isn't enough emphasis on what are we doing to manage our mind that is separate from the brain and the body, and that drives the brain and the body. The mind is embodied in the brain and the body. So if we're not managing mind, all the biohacking is certainly going to help, but your mind can undo it all if you don't manage it properly. So I think that's really where we should be putting more of our effort. And this is why I've spent nearly 38 years doing the research that I do, and still continue to do the research and publish and do these podcasts and write the books to research the mind and help us understand our mind and get those thoughts captured and sorted out and deconstructed, and make intrusive thoughts our best friend, and all the different things I talk about, and worry and anxiety and optimizing our mind. This is what we need to be focusing on. And if we look at the tips that Dr. Tucker talks about, and I'm going to give you his 3 top tips that has enabled him to, at 101, to still be the world's oldest practicing doctor and in the Guinness World Book of Records, his emphasis is on mind throughout. So let's look at his first tip. Okay, tip number 1, he constantly keeps his mind active. So the first tip wasn't some biohack physical, it was mind. And what is the hack of mind there? It is to keep the mind active. And he's not just talking about, going to the gym. He's talking about keeping the mind active. And his first thing is going to work, keeping going at work. That's his first main tip. And this we often hear, and there's research showing that when people retire, they go downhill very fast, cognitively and physically and mentally and emotionally. And I mean, I will never retire. I don't encourage people to retire. My oldest patient was an 84-year-old who basically, he was 84 at the end of the therapy, but at 79, he retired as a pilot. He was a pilot, and he's retired as a pilot, and he went back to go and do his next favorite thing in his life, which was to become an accountant. And he studied to become an accountant and qualified at 84. And I mean, that's like such a great story, but we should keep going. We shouldn't be stopping. You can maybe change jobs or change things, but first, to keep your mind active, keep going to work. I did a great podcast on how work should be meaningful and aligned with your core values, which is a tip from an ancient philosopher, Epicurus. And I'd recommend you go back and listen to that, because that's important to go to work and work that has meaning and aligns with your core values. Second thing, he says he never retired and keeps his mind busy even in his old age, solving medical problems and keeping updated on the most current research. So he's always solving medical problems. So he's using his mind to challenge his mind, and therefore challenge his brain, and therefore challenge his body. Healthy mind, healthy brain, healthy body. So he's solving the medical problems, reading the research. I mean, these are fantastic things. This is why I will keep doing research until I die. I will keep reading medical and research papers and writing them till I die. I will keep writing books. I will keep reading fantasy, all these things that I talk about, because this guy's 101 and he's doing that. He essentially has constantly challenged his mind and brain and has strived to learn new things his entire life. So are you constantly challenging your mind? Are you constantly challenging your mind and therefore your brain? Because what you do with your mind, your brain responds. And are you striving to learn new things all the time? Just the other day, I had to learn how to understand the back end of our app, which I didn't think was relevant to what I do because I've got a team to do that. But I realized that in order to do certain types of research, I needed to have an understanding. So to really challenge my mind. But that's good every time you do that. My husband, Mac, is 68, I'm 60, and he is learning to fly. That's been on his bucket list. So he's becoming not a commercial pilot, but he's learning to fly small planes. And the work that goes into that, he's constantly challenging his mind. We're still both working. We're not going to retire. No plans in our life to retire. I'm going to follow Dr. Tucker's advice to a T. He essentially, he not only keeps his mind stimulated, but he exposes his brain to new challenges. So that's like my husband flying, or myself trying to understand the back end of the app, which is like so out of my wheelhouse. When I sit with my research team, and I sit with like one of my research team, Charlie, who's incredibly good with all the neurophysiology side of what we do and incredibly good with statistics and numbers. And he has these sheets of numbers and statistics, and he just looks at this and he understands it. It tells him stories, and it's so out of my wheelhouse as well. But by sitting through those meetings, I'm challenging my mind. I ask questions, I learn. And I mean, every single meeting as a primary investigator of our research, I'm in every single meeting, even if I'm not actively doing the statistics or whatever it may be, I am learning, trying to understand as much as I can. So you want to expose your mind and brain to new challenges. This is mind work. So the decision for me to get into that meeting and understand what Charlie's saying, or to understand what our GR developers explaining about the back end or whatever, that is, I'm using my mind to make the decision to do it, and I'm using my mind to understand it. Learning new ways of doing things in our business, that's challenging my mind. And the more you keep your mind stimulated, the more you stimulate neuroplasticity, which I speak about a lot. So the brain mind body network has a remarkable ability to be endlessly reorganized and grown and optimized. And that regrowing and optimization comes from this challenge, active mind work that this Dr. Tucker is talking about, and that I do in my life, and probably maybe you do too. But make it a determined effort, be intentional and deliberate about making this part of your lifestyle. When you do that, you are setting up your mind-brain-body network for success and for longevity and for health. So it basically directing that neuroplasticity in the right direction. So basically neural networks are growing, and mind-brain-body networks are growing. So it's problem-solving, medical challenges, new things that forces the brain to adapt and grow. You get more gamma wave flowing, which is active when you are challenging your mind and you're trying to learn new things and you're trying to manage things, and that brings tremendous health to the brain. When you don't have as much gamma activity, your brain is not as healthy, your body is not as healthy, your mind is not as healthy. So then his second tip, so the first tip in summary then is go to work, keep your mind active with challenges, keep your mind active with the new, trying to solve problems and so on. So the second tip is he stimulates his mind by remaining socially active, okay? So community is essential. We know that. We know that the epidemic of isolation, how it's causing sickness, we know that when people are isolated, it increases their chance of getting cardiovascular disease by huge percentages. We know that people die from loneliness. I've spoken about it, written about it in my books. The Surgeon General spoke about it on my podcast last year. I mean, it's all over the place. There's books. So we know loneliness is not good for us. We know we need deep, meaningful connection. Community is absolutely essential. The work done on the blue zones also shows that community is absolutely essential in longevity. So community is an essential part of humanity, and so and is so healthy for our minds, brains, and bodies. Do you have a community? You know, we live in a very individualistic society, which I've spoken about often, and people are just going to work and going home. Do you have a community of support? Do you have friends or family, or can you create a community? Can you create a community? Can you become part of a community? Do you have a community? Even if it's just a few people and different parts, elements of a community. Maybe it's a couple of different communities, but we need community. So whether we like having alone time or not, we still need community. So it doesn't mean that you have to be with someone all the time. I love my alone time. And I love having time with people too, but I love being alone. But I know I've got a community. I have a strong family community. I have a strong friend base. I have an extended family community. And we be making plans in our life to even extend that community, strengthen that community even more. Especially as I'm getting older, we're making literal physical plans in our life to be able to be with our grandchild more and our children more and so on. So, in fact, engaging positively with people in our social support network correlates with a number of desirable physical and mental outcomes, and those which increase longevity. You are healthier mentally and physically, which increases peace, happiness, and your immune system, your endocrine system, your cardiovascular system, every system of your body is going to benefit when you are, number one, mentally active with your mind, and number two, when you are socially active. You're going to have a complete and utter change in your neurophysiology. So community involvement has been associated with mental health, cognitive resilience, reduction of chronic pain, lower blood pressure, improved cardiovascular health, improved immune function, improved endocrine function, the power of healing in groups. And it's where you see so many like rehabilitation sort of situations like AA and refuge recovery and smart recovery and those kinds of things. There's so much power in healing in groups. A lot of communities will have little groups. Churches have like little groups that meet weekly, for example. These communities are very important for the health. So the power of healing in groups and reaching out to others to help others as well, as opposed to just getting help for yourself, is really important. So community is you benefiting, but you also giving, and giving to others is part of your own healing. There's research showing that when you are helping others, you improve your own healing. You know, there's quite a lot of research in that vein. So high levels of social support predict longevity. High levels of an active mind predict longevity. So with your mind, you make the decision to be socially interactive. It's you using your mind to interact with others, to be part of a community, to give into that community, to talk to the people in that community, to create deep, meaningful relationships, to do things together, to help each other. That's all mind work. Okay. So high levels of social support predict longevity at least as reliably as healthy eating and regular exercise, and in fact more so, while low levels of social support are as damaging as high blood pressure. Low levels of social support are as damaging as having a high blood pressure. And high levels of social support are improving our health as reliably as we know, as in fact more so than eating healthy, because our mind being active and using our mind to be active and using our mind to be socially healthy is going to improve our food choices and also how nutrition gets into our cells. Because when we don't feel good about ourselves, when we isolate, our body doesn't work in the right way, and you don't get optimal nutrition. Even if you're eating good food, you'll lose the full benefit from that food if you're not managing your mind. If your mind is not, because your mind's pretty much driving your ability to absorb that nutrition, which is super interesting. So I challenge you, what changes can you make in your life in terms of being more active in your mind? Tip number 1, reading more, doing more problem-solving work, not thinking of retiring, maybe changing work that's more interesting, or creating other side interests that are going to be challenging you. So, keep that work factor going, that active mind in terms of work, and then making the decision to be more socially interactive. And then his third tip, to keep his mind stimulated in a fun way by reading for entertainment. So he reads for research, and he also reads for entertainment. So he's made a decision of his mind. Your mind is doing the reading, and your mind uses your brain as you're reading. Your mind uses your brain as you're doing the social interaction. Your mind uses your brain as you're doing the work. So your mind's the driving force here. Mind to work, mind to socialize, mind to read for entertainment. I've done a whole podcast on the importance of reading fantasy and reading fiction and fantasy, and to read it in balance. But he has a strong element in his life where he reads for pure entertainment. I mean, this is something that my years of research as a neuroscientist and as a practicing clinician has been one of my recommendations for people, is to read, stimulate your mind by reading. Whatever the age, it stimulates multiple parts of your brain. So go and listen to that podcast. I did a whole podcast on reading fiction. Now, one reason why reading can help keep our mind as sharp as we age is that it challenges our cognitive abilities. Because when you're reading, it's challenging memory, because you've got to remember a batch of information. And then in order to process the next thing, you've got to read from chapter to chapter. You've got to remember from day to day as you read. You've got to remember what happened before. You've got to remember the details of the character development, the names of the character. It's also stimulating you to think. You've got to imagine in your mind as you read all the different scenarios that they create. It stimulates you to apply it to your own life or the lives of your loved ones and so on. So it improves cognitive abilities. Reading requires us to comprehend and interpret complex information. So you've got to comprehend and interpret. So it's stimulating your intelligence. You've got to follow plot lines, as I've said. You've got to remember character details. You've got to make connections between various elements in the text. It becomes a great form of socialization. Like I'm reading a whole series that my two daughters have been reading, and we have these text conversations and verbal conversations about what's happening in the story. I'm sure you've done the same thing, but it generates a lot of social interaction. There's a lot of fun how we'll reference a character and say, oh, that one's Cassian, or that I need that dragon to get rid of that person, or whatever. You bring in, so the reading can filter back into the socialization aspect. So, you've got the feedback looping set up there. You've got the other part of the cognitive engagement of reading, improving cognitive functioning, engaging in these reading on a regular basis is activating, it means that you're engaging in these kinds of cognitive tasks on a regular basis. So it's exercising your mental faculties, which is so important. So it exercises memory, attention, problem solving, and that contributes to maintaining your cognitive function. Okay, so it all works hand in hand. And then that helps to reduce the risk of age-related things like, of age-related plus unmanaged toxic thought issues like cognitive decline. So, and the dementias and Alzheimer's disease and those kinds of things. So these 3 tips, keeping your brain active, being socially active, and reading for entertainment, can help as in a proactively preventative way against things like Alzheimer's and dementias and cognitive decline. That goes hand in hand as well. And I've spoken about this before, that also managing issues in your life, like using the neurocycle to manage traumas and things like that, also very important in preventing cognitive decline. But I'll do another podcast on that at some point. So reading a good book can be incredibly therapeutic. Not only does it build the brain, increase your stress resilience, but it can be very enjoyable and happy experience. I mean, you just enjoy it. And this is what Dr. Tucker emphasizes. It's the enjoyment factor, besides all those other fantastic things that reading does, which I've gone into detail in my other podcast. He really emphasizes the enjoyment and happiness factor. It's so enjoyable. I mean, have you got caught up in a book where you just can't wait to read the next thing to see what happens? And then you've got to wait for the next series in the book, and it's so frustrating. And then when it comes, you get so excited that it's arrived. That's enjoyment. That's good for you. That enjoyment and anticipation and excitement and happiness that it brings you is very good for longevity. It's very good for being able to still be leading the good life when you're 101. Visiting a library is a great place to start. I mean, I love libraries, love sitting in a library, love going to libraries. It makes me so sad when I've done work in the schools over the years. And, in South Africa, you have libraries in every school. When I came to the States, I was horrified that there's so many of the charter schools, for example, that don't have libraries. And when I would train teachers there, I would go and we would literally create libraries. We would get libraries started in schools and start the day with reading to children. Great way to start the day at any stage, whether it's pre-K all the way through to 12th grade, is start the day with some reading. It gets the brain prepared for the work of the day. That's not a waste of time. It's totally productive. And same thing with your work. When you introduce reading into this fun entertainment reading, it's not taking away from your work. It's enhancing your work. That's really important to understand. So visiting a library is a great place to start, and having a deadline to return a book will encourage you to actually read it instead of just forgetting about it. So, this is what I would do with my children. I would take them to the library. They would select their books and they would read them, and then they would take them back at the right time, the whole process. And so it's important to read books that interest you, that grab your attention, and not just books that you think you should read, and read widely. Open your mind. Don't get stuck in just reading like that belief system that you've grown up in. Read about other belief systems. Read about other people's stories. Read about other things. Don't be scared to read and know more about this world. It may even be a good idea to schedule a time to read. To maybe find a time where you think, okay, well, to get yourself back into it, you might have to say, okay, I am actually going to stop work at 5 o'clock, and after dinner from 7 till 9 or 7 till 8, I'm going to read. Schedule a time to get yourself, once you're into it and once you got caught up in a series, it's kind of like what I mentioned this before on the reading podcast, is that on my way, when we live in Miami as well, and on the way down to the gym, or getting in the car, I'm on my phone reading, in the elevator, reading the next thing, because I'm so excited to see what happens next. That's really good for your brain, really good for your mind. So, conclusion, 3 main tips that Dr. Tucker gives that he believes, it's obviously other things as well, and healthy eating and all that kind of thing, but his top 3 tips are mind related. His top 3 biohacks to be in the Guinness, that have got him into the Guinness World Book of Records as the oldest doctor that is practicing at 101 are: keep your mind active by going to work, keep your mind active by being socially interactive, keep your mind active by reading for entertainment. Beautiful. 3 beautiful, simple, easy tips. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I hope that you'll share it with friends and subscribe to my podcast and give me feedback. And if you can leave a review for me, that'll be amazing. And you know what? If you enjoyed it, do that. And if you enjoyed it, come back next week. I'm here for you. I'm here to help you get as much meaning out of life and give you these little tips to help you find that peace and happiness and get your mental health managed, which we all deserve. So thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.